The signal arrived on an ordinary morning, the kind of calm day when people expected nothing unusual. Most of humanity was busy with their normal routines, traveling to work, opening shop lights, teaching classes, or sipping warm drinks in quiet. Kitchens. No one knew that far away, on the edge of human explored space, something was watching, something was preparing, something was close. The story begins inside a quiet monitoring station floating around a small moon. The station had only a small team on duty because it was considered one of the least exciting places to work. For years, the listening arrays pointed toward deep space had heard nothing but empty static and distant star noise. People worked in slow shifts, almost sleepy, because no one expected anything important to happen there. But on that morning, everything changed. It started as a faint pulse, almost like a whisper tucked inside the background noise. At first, the team thought it was just another small error. Maybe the equipment needed recalibrating. Maybe the sensors had picked up a drifting rock. Such things happened all the time. No one felt concerned, but the pulse came again, and again, this time stronger. One member of the team leaned closer to the holographic display, narrowing their eyes at the weird pattern. It wasn't random static anymore. It had rhythm. It repeated in exact time intervals. It had intention behind it, as if someone or something was sending it deliberately. People in the control room exchanged glances. The atmosphere shifted from boredom to curiosity. They increased the gain on the listening array, filtering out unnecessary noise. When the signal grew sharper, a cold quiet spread across the room. Got another pulse, then a longer wave, then a burst of energy that didn't match any known natural phenomenon. They contacted the Earth Defense Communications Center immediately. Procedures required them to report anything unusual, even if it turned out to be harmless. But deep inside, the team already sensed this wasn't harmless. It felt different, like the deep breath before a storm. Back on Earth, inside a massive underground analysis facility, experts gathered around the projection of the signal. They ran it through multiple checks, frequency patterns, heat signatures, wavelength shifts. Nothing was familiar. It didn't match any known human communication system, and it didn't match any previous celestial event recorded over the last centuries. It was new. It was structured. It was foreign. News of the signal spread quietly between senior officials, each person growing more serious with every report. They couldn't make quick assumptions. The world had experienced false alarms before, microbursts from stars, strange magnetic storms, even glitches in equipment. But this pattern didn't look like a glitch. It had a coded structure that suggested a purpose. By late afternoon, a small emergency council was formed. Scientists, analysts, strategists, and representatives from several peaceful organizations were invited to review the information. As they studied the signal, tension grew in the room. The light from the projection screens reflected in their eyes as they replayed the pattern over and over, trying to understand it. Then came the moment it would later be remembered as the turning point in human history. A senior analyst isolated a hidden layer within the signal. It took hours of careful filtering and decoding before the pattern revealed what it truly was. It wasn't a message. It wasn't a communication request. It wasn't even a warning. It was a map. A map of moving objects. Objects heading directly for human-controlled space. When the pattern was fully visualized, the room fell silent. Everyone stared at the holographic display of tiny red markers drifting slowly toward the Helian expanse, the farthest zone of human settlement. The markers weren't natural. They moved with extreme precision. They adjusted their paths in coordinated alignment. None of them acted like asteroids. None of them acted like exploration probes. They moved like machines. Many machines, traveling together, approaching with purpose. Experts zoomed in further and discovered another disturbing detail. The object formation was growing. New markers appeared at the back, joining the movement at timed intervals, almost like reinforcements catching up to a larger group. This meant only one thing. Something organized was approaching. People in the room whispered softly, exchanging theories they wished were wrong. They did not jump to conclusions about hostility. Humanity had dreamed for centuries about peaceful first contact. But the pattern of movement suggested preparation, coordination, and something resembling a strategic formation, to make matters worse. Long-range scanners picked up unusual energy spikes around the far edge of the expanse. These spikes didn't match any known human technology. They were strong enough to trigger the early warning systems of 2 nearby colonies, even though the colonies were thousands of kilometers away from the exact source. Quiet panic built under the surface. No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone in that room felt the same heavy thought growing inside them. Something was coming. And it was coming soon. A final analysis from the automated defense system confirmed the worst suspicion. The pattern matched the early stages of a fleet mobilization, something that resembled ships gathering for a coordinated action. The message spread quickly through secure communication channels. Leaders around the world gathered in emergency meetings. Some tried to stay calm, insisting there might still be a peaceful explanation. Others, with years of experience in strategy and defense, understood that humanity had little time to react. The threat map continued to update live. More red markers appeared. The objects moved closer to the Warzone boundary, heading toward a region that held several research posts and small mining outposts. Many of the people working there had no idea anything unusual was happening. They were simply living their normal lives, far from the safety of Earth. Inside mission control rooms, teams worked at high speed. Families were quietly evacuated from outer settlements. Communication channels buzzed with encrypted messages. Artificial satellites realigned to track the incoming formation with higher accuracy. Then came the exact moment that changed everything. The red markers suddenly accelerated. Without warning, without any natural cause, they shifted into a tight formation, one that looked unmistakably like a pre-attack posture. Every expert in the room understood the meaning instantly. No one needed to say it out loud. The air grew heavy. A deep sinking feeling filled the room. This was not a peaceful visit. This was not exploration. This was not diplomacy. This was preparation for something dangerous. Within minutes, the decision was made to activate the highest alert level. Humanity had to act fast, but not in fear. There were millions of innocent lives spread across the frontier. They needed protection. They needed time. And they needed someone to intercept the incoming threat before it reached inhabited space. Across the world, screens turned red as the global alert spread. Defense forces were mobilized. The most advanced ships were prepared with urgency, but calm coordination. Engineers ran final checks. Pilots suited up. Commanders studied real-time data, making quick but careful decisions that could determine the future of humanity. While all this happened, ordinary people back on Earth remained unaware of the full danger. The news had not been released. Leaders didn't want panic, not until they understood the situation completely. But even without public announcements, some people sensed something was wrong. The atmosphere felt unusual, like a quiet tension, settling over the world. Meanwhile, the small monitoring station where the signal was first detected watched helplessly as the markers multiplied. The team felt a mix of fear and responsibility. If they had ignored the first pulse, if they had assumed it was just another equipment glitch, humanity might have lost precious hours of preparation. As the minutes passed, more data came in. The moving formation displayed smooth, flawless coordination. It didn't behave like drifting objects or unpiloted technology. It acted with intent. Observers across different facilities leaned closer to their screens, trying to understand the nature of what approached Dot. No shapes were fully clear yet. The formation was too far for visual identification. All they had were energy readings and movement patterns, but even these were enough to confirm the seriousness of what was happening. Every expert agreed on one thing. Whatever was coming had advanced capabilities. And it was heading straight for human territory. The Emergency Council reconvened, this time with fewer debates and more resolve. People spoke in soft but urgent tones. Every second mattered now. They had to respond before the incoming formation reached the first human outpost. But before they sent the alert to the fleet, something unexpected happened. The signal pulse returned. This time louder. Stronger. Clearer. It wasn't the same coded map as before. It carried a new pattern. Sharp peaks. Aggressive spikes. A rhythm that felt forceful, almost like a declaration. People in the control room exchanged tense looks. Even though they didn't yet know the exact meaning of the pattern, the tone behind. It felt unmistakably threatening, like a final declaration before action. Humanity didn't know who these newcomers were. They didn't know what they wanted, but they knew one thing. They were coming fast. And humanity would have to face them. The alert reached every major command center almost at the same moment. Screens lit up, alarms buzzed softly, and people who had been relaxed only minutes earlier suddenly became focused and serious. Humanity had spent decades preparing for possible dangers in deep space, but no one truly expected the day to come when those preparations would be needed. Inside a large operations hall on Earth, dozens of people stood around a central display that showed the incoming formation. The red markers moved slowly but steadily toward human territory, and there was no sign of them slowing down or changing direction. Analysts updated the data every few seconds, while communication officers connected with stations across different planets and moons. The decision was made quickly. The main defense fleet had to be mobilized. There was no other option. This wasn't a small issue that could be handled by a few patrol ships. Whatever was coming seemed organized and advanced, and if humanity waited too long, the formation would reach areas where thousands of workers lived. The fleet chosen for this mission was not just any fleet. It was the most important defense group humanity had ever built. It was known for handling the biggest emergencies and carrying some of the most skilled crews in space. People often said that if anything ever threatened human civilization, this was the fleet that would stand in the way. In a massive dockyard built on the far side of the moon, ships rested quietly under dim white lighting. These ships were enormous, each one shaped by years of engineering improvements. Their surfaces reflected faint light from the distant Earth, and despite their size, each vessel seemed calm, almost asleep, until the call to mobilize came. The announcement echoed across the dockyard. Crew members who had been resting jumped up immediately. Others who were already working simply moved faster. Tools clattered, boots hit the metal floors, and people talked in short, focused sentences. There was no panic. There was only purpose inside. The largest ship, the flagship of the entire fleet, people prepared their stations. Technicians ran quick checks on systems that normally took hours. Engineers monitored power levels. Officers studied maps and reports. Every part of the ship felt alive as the crew worked together to get everything ready for launch. What made this moment intense was not fear, but uncertainty. Humanity had never faced an unknown force heading directly toward its worlds. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wondered what the approaching formation represented. But until they reached the Warzone, they could only prepare and hope they had enough time. One by one, the ships powered up. It began with a deep hum, that vibrated through the floors, followed by the glow of engines lighting up like bright stars. As the power levels increased, the dockyard filled with a soft blue haze from the energy coils warming up. People watching from control towers felt a mix of pride and worry. These ships represented humanity's strength, but sending them into an unknown situation weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Still, they had no choice. The frontier settlements depended on them. As the ships prepared to launch, families of crew members sent final messages through private channels. Short videos, audio notes, a few quick words of encouragement. Some people stayed calm. Others tried to hide their concerns. Even though these crews were trained for emergencies, they were still human. They had people waiting for them back home. They had hopes and fears like anyone else. Outside the dockyard, small transport vehicles zipped across different sections, carrying final supplies, food containers, medical kits, tools for repairs. Every item mattered because once the fleet entered the war zone, there would be no turning back until the mission was complete. Across the fleet, senior officers discussed the situation through secure communication lines. They knew speed was important. The incoming formation was still hours away from the nearest outpost, but every minute counted. If they reached the war zone early, they could block the path. If they arrived late, the unknown objects could pass deeper into human-controlled space. Final approval came from the top level of Earth's Defense Council. A soft chime echoed through each ship, followed by a calm voice delivering the authorization. The fleet was officially cleared for departure. Inside the flagship, crew members straightened as the command was given. People looked at each other, exchanging small nods. Not a single person backed away. Not one questioned the decision. Everyone understood the weight of the mission. One of the officers activated the main launch system. A low vibration traveled through the ship as massive clamps began to release. Throughout the dockyard, heavy support beams lifted, freeing the ships to move. Outside, in the cold vacuum of space, the engines ignited fully, creating a gentle but powerful burst of light. One by one, the ships lifted from their docking platforms. The entire fleet rose together, hundreds of meters above the surface, forming a silent but impressive formation. People watching from the moon's surface shelters stared in awe as the giant vessels moved smoothly into position. The ships looked like glowing islands drifting upward, their lights reflecting faintly on the dusty ground below. When the fleet aligned perfectly, the final countdown began. 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1. In an instant, the engines flared brighter, and the entire fleet surged forward, leaving behind glowing trails as they accelerated away from the moon. Within moments, they broke into open space, heading toward the edge of the Helian expanse. Inside the ships, the atmosphere felt very different from the busy dockyard. A quiet focus settled over everyone. Screens displayed maps, trajectories, and updates on the unknown formation. Crew members strapped into their seats, adjusting their headsets and checking their instruments. The journey to the war zone wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. The ships would need to travel at high speed through safe travel lanes. Everyone used this time to prepare mentally and physically. Some quietly breathed to stay calm. Others studied movement patterns of the unknown objects. A few simply stared at the stars passing by outside the windows. Even with all the training and experience, the silence before a mission was always the hardest part. It gave people too much time to think. Would humanity face diplomacy? A misunderstanding? A harmless discovery? Or something far more serious? No one had those answers yet. Back on Earth, analysts continued to track the movement of the formation. Reports were sent to the fleet every few minutes. The objects showed no signs of slowing down or changing their formation. In fact, new readings showed that they were adjusting speed in small but intentional ways, almost like they were preparing for something. Inside the flagship's command center, people studied every update carefully. They needed to know what they were dealing with before they engaged. The goal was not conflict. The goal was protection. If the formation turned out to be harmless, the fleet would welcome communication. If it turned out to be dangerous, they would be ready to shield the frontier. Hours passed as the fleet continued at high speed. The stars outside seemed to stretch into long lines as the ships cut through space. From a distance, they looked like glowing arrows moving through a dark ocean. Finally, they reached the boundary of the Helian expanse. The fleet slowed down, engines dimming to a soft glow. People in the command centers straightened as the final approach began. The war zone wasn't a place of fighting. It was simply what the defense forces called regions at risk. It marked the zone where anything could happen, and where the fleet had to act quickly. As they entered this region, long-range scanners activated automatically, sweeping through space with gentle waves of light. Data poured into the screens, showing asteroid positions, radiation levels, and temperature shifts. Then the unknown formation appeared on the scanners. Everyone froze for a moment. The red markers they had seen earlier were now much larger and clearer. They stood out brightly against the dark background, moving in a tightly controlled formation. People leaned closer to the displays, their eyes widening. Even though they couldn't see detailed shapes yet, the very presence of the formation, now so close, made everything feel real. This wasn't a simulation. This wasn't a drill. Humanity was about to face something completely new. Inside every ship, hearts beat a little faster. Thoughts raced quietly. But no one lost focus. No one panicked. They had a mission, and every person there knew they were part of something that would be remembered for generations. The fleet continued moving deeper into the region. Engines hummed softly as they formed a precise defensive alignment. Their lights glowed steadily, cutting through the darkness as they prepared to intercept whatever was coming. The next step would determine everything: humanity's safety, the future of frontier colonies, and the first true contact with the unknown. The fleet was ready. The war zone lay ahead, and whatever waited there, humanity would face it together. The fleet moved slowly into the dark region of space, the place people had only spoken about in reports and training sessions. Now they were finally here, witnessing everything with their own eyes. The war zone was silent, almost too silent. It felt as if the entire universe was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Inside the flagship, everyone watched their displays carefully. The unknown formation was still ahead, but now it wasn't a distant cluster of small dots. It was close enough for the scanners to create clearer outlines. The shapes were not yet fully visible, but there were hints of large structures, faint curves, and symmetrical patterns that didn't belong to drifting rocks or natural space debris. The tension in the air grew slowly. People spoke in low voices, making sure every small detail was recorded. The hum of the engines mixed with the soft beeping of instruments. It wasn't a frightening sound, just a reminder that everything was active, awake, and preparing for whatever came next. As the fleet moved deeper into the region, small drones were released from the sides of several ships. These drones were tiny compared to the giant vessels, but they were incredibly useful. They raced ahead, their lights flashing as they scanned space from different angles. Their purpose was simple: gather information before the fleet got too close. Inside the command center, screens lit up with fresh sensor data. People leaned forward, observing tiny changes in numbers, energy readings, and movement patterns. Every piece of information mattered now, because no one wanted to be caught off guard. Even though the mission was calm so far, everyone knew things could change in a moment. The deeper they went, the stronger the signal became. That strange pulse first discovered at the lonely monitoring station now echoed through their systems like a slow heartbeat. It wasn't loud, but it was noticeable enough to remind everyone of the danger ahead. The pattern repeated steadily. like something marking its presence on purpose. One of the analysts pointed out that the signal seemed to be reacting to the fleet's movements. Each time the ships adjusted their path or slowed slightly, the pulse changed rhythm by the smallest amount. No one knew what that meant. Was it a form of communication? A warning? Or something else entirely? People didn't jump to conclusions. They simply observed, recorded, and remained cautious. After several minutes, one of the drones transmitted its first visual capture. The image flashed across the main screen, and the room grew even quieter, something that didn't seem possible given the silence. Already there, the formation ahead wasn't random at all. The shapes looked organized, arranged in lines that curved slightly, almost like a wave pattern. The objects themselves were large, far larger than anyone expected. They weren't shaped like any known human-built ships. Their surfaces reflected only a faint amount of light, making it hard to see exact details. But one thing was clear: they were not natural objects. These things had been built, and they were moving with intention. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The sight in front of them wasn't frightening because of any threat, but because of how unfamiliar it was. Humanity had always wondered if it was alone in the universe. Now they had proof that something else existed, something with its own technology, its own design, and its own purpose. The fleet maintained a slow, steady speed. They didn't want to appear aggressive. Their formation was defensive but calm. No one wanted to make a sudden move that could be misunderstood. This moment could define the future of human interaction with the unknown. As they approached, the crew of each ship grew more focused. Some people pressed their hands against their seats to steady their nerves. Others calmly reviewed data screens, reminding themselves that their training prepared them for this exact situation. To reduce tension, a few officers spoke softly with each other, grounding themselves by discussing simple things: previous missions, the view of stars through the window, the quiet beauty of space. It helped remind everyone that they were still human, still connected, even in the middle of the unknown. The commander of the flagship ordered the fleet to halt at a safe distance. Engines dimmed slightly, and the motion slowed until the ships held almost still. The formation ahead hadn't reacted aggressively. It simply hovered, drifting slowly in the same formation as before. People watched carefully to see if their arrival triggered any change. Nothing happened at first. Then, after several seconds, one of the unknown objects emitted a faint glow. It wasn't bright or threatening. It was gentle, almost like a star flickering behind a thin veil. The scanners picked up new energy readings, and analysts hurried to interpret them. But the readings didn't match anything familiar. They were stable, balanced, and repeated in cycles. It almost resembled a beacon, something broadcasting presence rather than aggression. This made the entire moment even more confusing. Was this formation preparing for contact? Was it signaling something? Or were these objects simply following a pattern unrelated to the fleet? The silence continued as everyone watched the glowing object. One of the drones moved closer, slowly shifting toward the formation to gather more detailed scans. People held their breath as the drone approached, expecting anything to happen, but the objects made no move. The drone captured more images. This time, the shapes became a bit clearer. The outer surfaces appeared smooth, almost metallic, with lines that curved around each structure like natural patterns. They didn't resemble human technology at all. They looked foreign, designed with a different understanding of engineering and aesthetics. Some of the crew members whispered to themselves, expressing wonder rather than fear. Humanity had always looked up at the stars with curiosity, dreaming of other civilizations. And now, something from the unknown was finally here, right in front of them. Still, caution remained. Until intentions were clear, the fleet couldn't assume anything. After several minutes of observation, the commander gave the order to move slightly closer. The ships adjusted their alignment and drifted a little forward, maintaining perfect formation. Even this small movement made hearts race inside the ships. Every person felt the weight of the moment. This was the first real approach. The fleet maintained a respectful distance to show they meant no harm. The aim was to understand the situation, not escalate it. The hope was that the unknown formation would show some sign of communication, a light pattern, a motion. Anything got as the fleet inched closer. The unknown objects showed their first significant change. A low, steady vibration pulsed through the scanners. It wasn't loud, but it was strong enough for the instruments to detect clearly. The energy levels rose slightly, then returned to normal. The formation remained in place, maintaining its strange but steady alignment. People exchanged thoughtful looks. The vibration didn't seem threatening. It felt more like a response. Acknowledgement even. Like the unknown formation was aware of the fleet's presence and simply reacting. The room filled with a strange mix of emotions: curiosity, caution, excitement, and a quiet sense of history. Whatever was happening here was more than a mission. It was a moment that future generations would study. A moment that held the possibility of peaceful contact, or something entirely different. Then the most unexpected thing happened. One of the unknown objects shifted its position just slightly. Drifted a few meters to the side, adjusting its alignment, as though making space or inviting something forward. The motion was smooth and controlled. It didn't look defensive. It didn't look aggressive. It looked intentional. People watched in silent amazement. The analysts studied the movement pattern and confirmed that it didn't match any known attack formation. If anything, it resembled an opening gesture, like creating a safe path between the objects. But no one could be sure. This was uncharted territory. The commander decided not to move closer yet. The fleet needed to understand what the shift meant before taking action. Instead, they waited. And as they waited, the unknown formation remained calm. The darkness of the war zone felt strangely peaceful now. There was no sound, no sudden motion, no sense of danger, only the quiet presence of two groups facing each other for the first time, separated by distance, but connected by curiosity. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Every second built anticipation. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt full of meaning, as if the entire moment was suspended between possibility and discovery. One of the crew members whispered something softly, that maybe this was the beginning of something new. A new chapter in human history. A moment that people had long imagined, but never truly believed would happen. Others nodded silently. The fleet remained steady, lights glowing softly in the dark, engines humming in calm rhythm. The unknown formation floated quietly ahead, glowing faintly, waiting, watching, existing. The war zone wasn't a battlefield now. It was a meeting place, a place where humanity stood, face to face with the unknown, close enough to feel the weight of discovery, yet far enough to respect the distance. The moment was fragile, delicate, filled with both hope and uncertainty, and everyone knew that whatever happened next would shape the story forever. The fleet held its position in the dark stretch of space, studying the unknown formation that hovered quietly ahead. Everyone inside the ships felt a strange mix of tension and calmness. The objects had not acted unfriendly, but they had not shown any clear signs of peaceful intent either. It was the kind of moment where every small detail mattered. Every light, every pulse, every shift in movement. Inside the flagship, people kept their eyes on the screens. Their voices remained steady, but the seriousness in the room was impossible to miss. Everyone felt the weight of responsibility on their shoulders. They weren't just representing a mission, they were representing the entire human race. Whatever decision they made here could affect the future of humanity's relationship with the unknown. For several long minutes, nothing changed. The formation remained still. The gentle pulsing light continued in steady waves, and the energy readings leveled out at a calm frequency. It almost felt like the unknown formation was waiting for something, maybe for the fleet, to make the next move. The commander of the fleet didn't want to rush. Every part of their training emphasized caution, especially in unfamiliar situations. Rushing could be misinterpreted. A fast approach might look aggressive. A sudden withdrawal might look fearful. So the fleet remained steady, giving the unknown objects time to react on their own. Then something unexpected happened. A small shimmer of light rippled across one of the unknown structures. At first, no one understood what caused it. The scanners picked up a soft change in the energy pattern, almost like the object was communicating internally or adjusting something within itself. The ripple of light traveled across the surface, forming faint shapes that looked like patterns or symbols. But they appeared only for a moment before fading. People leaned closer to their screens, trying to catch every detail. It's like they're preparing. Someone whispered softly, not in a harmful way. More like a shift in posture, the way a person might adjust their stance before speaking or responding, before anyone could interpret the meaning. A soft vibration echoed across the fleet's scanners. It wasn't strong, and it wasn't chaotic. It was controlled. It resembled a signal, but one that lacked clear structure, almost like a sound someone makes before forming actual words. This left everyone with the same thought. Maybe the unknown formation was trying to communicate. The fleet responded in the calmest way possible. Instead of sending a complicated signal that might be misunderstood, they released a small, gentle beam of harmless light from one of the ships. The beam wasn't aimed at the objects directly. It simply spread across space like a soft glow, showing openness without crossing the invisible line between them. The unknown formation reacted. 3 of the objects shifted slightly, not aggressively, not quickly, just enough to rearrange themselves into a new alignment. The movement was smooth, controlled, almost graceful. The soft glow on their surfaces brightened for a few seconds before dimming again. People inside the ships realized this was the first clear response the formation had given. The fleet waited, giving the objects time to act again. Then came a moment that changed everything. The scanners detected a rising energy spike from one of the unknown structures. At first, people feared it might be a sign of something dangerous, but the pattern didn't match any kind of attack. There was no sharp increase, no unstable fluctuations. It was slow and steady, like something powering up. The crew watched the screen carefully. The energy kept rising until it reached a stable level. Then it happened. A wide, soft wave of light spread outward from the unknown object. It wasn't harmful. It didn't damage anything. It simply passed through space, like a giant ripple of calm illumination. Every ship in the fleet felt a faint vibration as the wave touched their sensors. Lights flickered for a moment, then everything stabilized. A quiet gasp spread through the room as people checked their displays. The wave had done something no one expected. It had lowered the defensive shields of every ship, not by force, but by tuning into their frequency and gently reducing their energy output. Not destroying, not harming. Just neutralizing. As if sending a message. We can see your defenses, and we can touch them, but we choose not to hurt you. A message that delivered 2 truths at the same time. The unknown formation had impressive abilities, but it had used them gently. This realization hit everyone at once. The fleet had been prepared for danger, not for this kind of measured, almost peaceful demonstration. It wasn't an attack. It was a statement, like someone showing their hands to prove they had nothing harmful hidden. People in the command center exchanged careful looks. The unknown objects had shown capability, but also restraint. It was a sign that the fleet needed. To respond wisely, the commander gave calm instructions for the ships to maintain position and avoid any sudden moves. The shields slowly powered up again, returning to normal strength. But the message had already been received. The unknown formation had enormous control, and humanity needed to approach this with respect. As the fleet tried to interpret the meaning of the wave, something else appeared on the scanners. Another burst of energy was forming around the far edge of the formation. It was different this time. It wasn't directed at the fleet. It wasn't even close to them. It came from the far corner of the unknown group, where a large structure hovered quietly. The energy spike built slowly, and then a visual confirmation came through the drone cameras. A small object was drifting away from the formation. It looked like a malfunctioning probe, or a damaged part of one of the larger structures. It wobbled, its lights flickering weakly. The energy spike the scanners detected came from this unstable movement. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a threat. It was something breaking down. The unknown formation wasn't preparing for conflict. It was dealing with a problem. Suddenly, everything made sense. The earlier shifting, the soft pulses, the reorganization of the formation. It was a coordinated attempt to protect the unstable object. The fleet realized the truth. The unknown group wasn't here to attack. They were responding to their own emergency. The fleet immediately switched from defensive priorities to safety-focused protocols. They prepared to assist if needed. Several members suggested sending a drone with basic tools or scanning equipment. But they had to be careful. Any sudden assistance could be misinterpreted. But then something remarkable happened. The unknown formation moved again. Two of the objects glided slowly toward the unstable piece. Their surfaces glowed softly, and gentle waves of energy flowed between them. It looked like they were stabilizing the drifting part, protecting it, guiding it back into position. Humanity watched in silence. They weren't witnessing a battle. They were witnessing cooperation within the unknown formation itself. The fleet felt a quiet shift inside every ship. Fear lessened. Understanding grew. The objects weren't a danger. They were capable, organized, and surprisingly calm even during their own internal issue. And then came the clearest moment of all. After securing the unstable piece, the formation turned slightly toward the fleet. The soft glow on their surfaces increased again. It wasn't a hostile gesture. It looked almost like appreciation, a gentle acknowledgement that the fleet had stayed calm and not interfered. The fleet responded with a slow, careful adjustment of position, a respectful gesture in return. Two groups, two different kinds of beings, sharing a quiet moment of understanding in the dark of space. The tension that had filled the war zone earlier now faded. Nothing felt dangerous anymore. It felt like a connection, silent, delicate, but meaningful. The unknown formation slowly began to reposition itself, turning away from human territory. Not in fear, not in retreat, simply returning to its original path, now that its internal issue was resolved. The fleet observed quietly as the formation drifted farther and farther away, its lights growing smaller against the dark sky. Eventually, the pulse faded, and the scanners no longer picked up any readings. The unknown group had come and gone without conflict, leaving behind a moment humanity would never forget. The fleet stayed in formation, watching until the last faint light disappeared. Everyone knew they had witnessed something historic, proof that the unknown didn't have to mean danger, and that peace could exist even between strangers across the stars. After the unknown formation drifted out of sight, a deep silence settled over the fleet. It felt like the whole universe had suddenly paused to breathe. The crew members sat there, still watching their monitors, almost unsure of what to do next. Moments like this didn't happen often. For years, People had imagined how a first encounter might go. Some expected fear, some expected danger, some expected confusion. But no one truly expected what had just happened: peace without words, understanding without language, connection without force. Inside the flagship, the quiet was strangely comforting. People looked around at each other with expressions that were hard to describe. They weren't exactly smiling, but their faces felt lighter, as if they had returned from a long, tense moment and found calm waiting for them. The commander slowly stood up, not rushing, just taking a moment to absorb the reality of what had happened. There were no cheers, no loud reactions, no dramatic announcements. Instead, everyone simply felt grateful that things had ended in such a calm and respectful way. The ship stayed in formation for some time, making sure the area was stable. Scanners swept the space again and again, confirming that no unusual energy signatures remained. Everything was normal. Everything was safe, but something had changed. Not in space, inside. Every person on those ships felt like they had witnessed a small part of history, something that would stay with them forever. Finally, the fleet received the order to return. Engines powered up softly, and one by one, the ships began to move. They followed the same route they had taken earlier, but somehow the journey felt completely different. The darkness of space didn't seem threatening anymore. It felt open, mysterious, but also welcoming in a strange way. As the fleet traveled back, people replayed the events in their minds. The soft pulses of light, the peaceful gestures, the gentle wave that had lowered their shields without harming anything. Everything had been done with such calm control. The unknown formation had shown power, but more importantly, it had shown understanding. It had demonstrated that abilities didn't have to be used for harm. They could be used with care. That idea left a deep impression on everyone. Some wondered what kind of beings controlled that formation. Did they think like humans? Did they feel emotions? Did they see the world the same way? Or were they completely different? No one had the answer. But maybe the answer didn't matter right now. What mattered was that two very different sides had met and nothing bad happened. Hours passed as the fleet continued its journey. Life slowly returned to normal. People drank water, stretched, talked quietly with each other. But the atmosphere remained softer than usual. Even the smallest conversations seemed thoughtful. Someone mentioned how the unknown objects had helped each other repair the unstable piece. Another person talked about how their energy patterns felt more like a language than a tool. Someone else said they felt strangely honored to have witnessed something so rare. The commander listened quietly to everything, letting the voices around them sink in. They didn't interrupt. They didn't need to. Sometimes the best leadership was letting people process things in their own way. When the fleet finally approached familiar space, the tension lifted even more. The stars looked brighter. The lines on the navigation maps felt warmer, like returning to a safe home after a long journey through the unknown. The communication system activated automatically as they neared the boundary. A calm voice from the central station came through, asking for a status update. The commander answered in a steady tone, giving a short version of events, not exaggerated, not dramatic, just clear and honest. There was a quiet pause on the other side of the transmission. It was obvious the person hearing the report was stunned. After another moment, the voice responded gently, almost with disbelief, thanking the commander and the crew for handling the situation with such calmness. The fleet moved on, now escorted by guiding signals that led them back to their home station. As the ships entered the docking area, the glow of familiar lights washed over them. It felt comforting, like stepping inside after a long night in the cold. Inside the station, people waited, not with loud excitement, but with eager curiosity. Everyone had heard the initial reports, but they wanted to see the crew with their own eyes. They wanted to feel the energy of the moment, When the first group stepped out of the ship, the atmosphere felt almost ceremonial. No one pushed or crowded. Instead, people approached slowly, offering warm smiles and supportive pats on the shoulder. There was admiration in their eyes, not because the crew fought a battle, but because they chose not to. They held their ground, stayed calm, and treated the unknown with respect. The crew members shared what they saw and felt. They described the light pulses, the gentle wave, the quiet signs of cooperation inside the unknown formation. Everyone listened with full attention. The entire station felt united by the experience. Later, the central leadership gathered for a formal debriefing. But even that meeting didn't feel strict. The atmosphere was thoughtful, almost reflective. People asked simple, honest questions. They focused on understanding, not on fear. One of the leaders said something that stayed with many. Not all power is dangerous. Sometimes the strongest power is the gentlest one. That sentence echoed in people's minds. The station recorded every detail the crew reported, not to prepare for conflict, but to learn, to understand, to build a foundation of knowledge that might help if another encounter ever happened. But in the middle of all the discussions and reports, life went on as usual. People ate meals, walked through the halls, sat at their desks. But something about their expressions had changed. There was a softness, a quiet hopefulness, as if a door had opened somewhere far in the universe, showing them that humanity wasn't alone and that not everything unknown must be feared. The next day, the crew members were given time to rest. They gathered in a quiet lounge overlooking the stars. The room was simple, with soft lighting and comfortable seats. They sat together without uniforms, without formal roles, just people sharing a moment. They didn't rush to talk. They just looked out the window. The stars glimmered gently, each one carrying possibilities. Someone quietly said that the stars felt different, now, not distant, but somehow more alive. Another person wondered aloud if the unknown formation had seen humanity the same way the humans saw them, with curiosity, caution, and maybe even a bit of hope. Their conversation flowed naturally. No stress, no fear, just soft thoughts about the experience. The commander joined them a little later. Instead of giving instructions or speeches, they simply sat down and joined the quiet reflection. After a long moment, they finally spoke. "What happened out there?" the commander said softly. "Reminds us that the universe is bigger than our worries. And sometimes it is kinder than we expect." No one replied, but everyone felt that. Deeply. In the days that followed, the event became known as one of the calmest first encounters in history. People across stations, colonies, and outposts talked about it. Artists painted scenes of the glowing formation. Writers described the quiet meeting in poetic ways. Children imagined what the unknown beings might look like, drawing peaceful shapes and bright colors. But the most important impact was internal. Humanity gained confidence, not in its weapons or strength, but in its ability to stay calm, respectful, and open-minded. The encounter reminded everyone that the universe wasn't only about defending or conquering. It was also about learning, listening, and exchanging silent gestures of understanding. The fleet members went on with their lives, but none of them forgot the moment when two different worlds hovered in silence, observing each other with mutual respect. Years later, some of them would still talk about the soft wave of light that passed over their ships. They described how it felt not frightening, not harmful, just strangely warm, like being acknowledged by something that understood them in a way words could not explain. Humanity continued exploring, continued dreaming, continued searching. And every time they looked at the stars, they remembered that somewhere out there, in the quiet stretch of space, was a group of beings who had once approached them with calmness and left without leaving a single mark of harm. A peaceful encounter. A silent promise. a reminder that kindness exists even in the vast unknown God, and maybe, one day, paths would cross again, not by accident, but by choice.